So, section 5 of Mice and Men revision. So we start how we always start. Steinbeck uses cinematic techniques. One of the interesting things with this one is the line, like a mountain slope to the other end of the barn. Steinbeck is describing the hay that is in the barn. Now remember, as soon as you have any description, you're looking for things like blah, 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 blah. No one knows what I'm talking about at this stage. I'm just of Mice and Men delirious. But you are looking for writing techniques or connotations, and this is a simile. And it sort of references to the surroundings, the mountains that surround the ranch, and also suggests the amount of hay, kind of almost like a secluded area. And of course, Lenny is busy trying to bury his little puppy. We have something that is referenced a couple of times, certainly in section 4, when Curly's wife leaves Crooks, Candy and Lenny, which is the rattle, the halter chains, just describing the noises of the barns. And that onomatopoeia of rattled suggests sort of an air of tension that is about to be created through the action. What's interesting is Steinbeck describes the barn as quiet and humming and lazy and warm, and the use of "and" rather than just a list there suggests the things that perhaps make it so comfortable and calming. It emphasises those things, especially lazy and warm. It suggests an image of safety there, and quite a contrast of what is about to happen. And so poor Lenny is trying to cover up the fact that he has killed his puppy. And he says, "You ain't so little as mice. I didn't bounce you hard." And of course that's a reference to section 1 where he's killed the mouse. And the theme of violence and death is certainly present. It's also empathetic in the fact that it makes a sort of an emotional moment. On 93... he is more afraid of George finding out and not being able to tend the rabbits than the dog actually being killed, or the puppy being killed. It shows Lenny's sense of fear and again makes him very childlike. And I've got it with here, maybe George won't care, again making him childlike, really trying to work out what to do for the best. Excuse me. He also says, "They told me you wasn't." He's talking about how the puppy wasn't big enough to be picked up and played with. And it shows that Lenny does not learn from experience, which of course is ironic considering the incident described in section 2 and section 1 in Weed and what is about to happen in this section. Then Curly's wife comes into this particular section on page 94. And again, she's described in very similar ways to she was in section 2 and 4, the mules with the red ostrich feathers. Connotations of red include danger, which I'm thinking she should probably be feeling at this point, and, passion, flirtatious nature. Important to mention those things. It shows that you're analysing language, which is certainly on the mark scheme. And she asks him what he's doing. Through the use of Sonny Boy, it's almost quite gentle, and it shows that she's lonely and she needs that companionship. Remember, loneliness is a theme. And it shows that Lenny is very upset about things, and he says that George says he can't tend the rabbits. "If I talk to you or anything," and it shows that sort of childlike quality, but it also shows that he follows George's lead, which makes it unique for 1930s America because they have that unique friendship when usually it was every man for himself. George looks out for him as a parent would to a child or for a child. 95, page 95, there's a categoric reference at the top where George, scared, "I'll get in trouble," and that's something that Lenny says to Curly's wife, and of course by interacting with her he does get into trouble even though it's not his fault and it is an accident. She then of course finds the puppy, which reaffirms the theme of violence and death, and it says about how Lenny killed him. "I was just playing with him and he made like he was going to bite me and I made like I was going to smack him and I done it and then he was dead." And it shows his sort of instinctive personality, which is why Steinbeck describes him as using animalistic similes throughout, that he simply thinks about something, does it, and then realises the consequences afterwards, and that is very childlike. She then consoles him. This is an opportunity for her to be able to talk to someone, but it also shows that she's trying to make him feel better, trying to comfort him at that time. She then persuades him to talk to her, and she's quite manipulative in the way that she does it, and she's trying to be kind to him. And of course, it's because she's lonely. However, the short sentence of her face grew angry because he's saying that George said that he's not to talk to her. She kind of, she feels that her kindness is being thrown back at her, even though Lenny doesn't mean to do it. He's just been told by George. And then she starts talking about her dream, and her dream of being an actress, or rather she met one of the actors in a show. He says, I could go with that show. It's something that she believes that she's able to do. And that metaphor of, and then her words tumbled out in a passion of communication. It's almost as if she's been holding back on this for so long, and now she's able to communicate it to the one person who won't remember anyway. And as she's talking about her dream and slowly revealing, or Steinbeck is revealing, why she acts a certain way, so for example, physically portraying her dream, and also by physically talking about it, even though Lenny's not interacting with her and sort of just listening, it gives that dream power. It is the most powerful her dream is throughout the novel, which is ironic because as soon as it gains power and it's almost as if she could do something about it, she then dies. Awkward. But Lenny has no kind of comprehension of what's going on, and is very similar to the way he was in section 4 when Crooks is talking to him. He kind of goes into his own world and sort of makes these random comments, and he talks about the pup, and he talks about he's stroking the pup, and he's talking about the little place and the rabbits. It's sort of his go-to for comfort. Bottom of page 96. Yeah, I almost read it wrong then. She says, I always thought that my old lady stole it. She's talking about letters. She believes that the man who was saying that she was good enough to go to Hollywood was going to write to her, and she thought her old lady, meaning her mother, has stolen that letter. Probably, although it's not said, more likely that the man never wrote to her because he probably wasn't a Hollywood actor. She seems quite naive in the way that she believes things. And then on the top of page 97, she reveals that's why she married Curly, despite her mother. And it shows that she too works on instinct. So I married Curly. That simple sentence sort of shows that unplanned decision. Met him out the Riverside Dance Palace that same night, she demanded. You listening? Me? Sure. Bless Lenny, he's not listening at all. He has no idea what's going on. And then she continues her dream, and then she admits that I don't like Curly. She doesn't like him at all, although that has been revealed in section 4. It affirms that. He ain't a nice fella. It shows that perhaps she has been mistreated, and all of a sudden Steinbeck creates a sense of sympathy for Curly's wife, rather than the way she's been portrayed up until now, which is irritating, annoying, flirtatious, inappropriate. And this bit's a really good bit to show how she's been physically portraying her dream. The fingers trailed after her leading wrist, and her little finger stuck out grandly from the rest, as if she's showing her acting skills. And it shows that with the red lipstick and the nail varnish and the mules and the way she dresses and her hair, she's been physically portraying her dream from the beginning. At the bottom of page 97, Lenny shows that he's very childlike. He's trying to work out how he can hide the puppy from George so he won't know, and then he won't get into trouble for it, which is actually quite a common thing that children might do. And Curly's wife says angrily, don't you think of nothing but rabbits? She's pouring her heart out to Lenny, and Lenny doesn't seem bothered. He has no idea how important this is to her. However, when he explains the situation and, starts talking about the focal dream, she almost takes an interest in Lenny. She asked, what makes you so nuts about rabbits? And that's interesting because really, apart from Crooks, who almost talks to Lenny because he's mocking him, no one really takes an interest. They take an interest in George and what George has to say about Lenny about the dream, but they don't take an interest in Lenny. So she's actually interacting with him and taking an interest in him, which shows that kind of kinder side to her that hasn't been seen up until now. And then she has a conversation with him and things that he likes to do, and they talk about things that he likes to touch. And George, he says that George says, I like to pet nice things with my fingers, soft things. She was a little bit reassured. Well, who don't? She said. Everyone likes that. I like to feel silk and velvet. Do you like to feel velvet? And of course, that's a reference to Weed, where Lenny holds on to the girl's dress and she screams and then accuses him of something he hasn't done. Now, at the bottom of page 98, there are a few things here. The fact that Curly's wife says, but you're kind of nice fella, just like a big baby. Kind of nice fella. It shows that not only she is a kind person for recognising it, but recognises him as being a safe person. That and the fact that she has used this, well, Steinbeck's used a simile, like a big baby, to describe him is rather ironic, because it suggests that Lenny is safe, yet he is the one that ends up killing her. So there's that to mention. And she encourages him to start touching her hair because her hair is so soft. She describes Curly's hair and says his hair is just like wire. And of course that reflects his perhaps nasty personality, unpleasant personality. And then she takes Lenny's hand, so almost instructing him to feel her hair. And of course we know from section 3 and section 2 that Lenny works best when he is instructed to do something. Unfortunately, she is setting herself up to be killed. She doesn't know that yet, obviously. Now, the use of Lenny's big fingers fell to stroking her hair. Steinbeck uses the word big there to almost act as if his fingers are so much bigger than the size of her head and what he is feeling. It also suggests a sense of strength, which is about to be revealed. She encourages his behaviour by saying, oh, that's nice. Oh, that's nice. And almost encouraging him again in an instructional way. However, very soon after that, in the next paragraph, things go horribly wrong. So things like jerk got connotations of, something quite unpleasant, something that is connected to pain. The fact that Lenny's fingers close and Steinbeck uses the word close suggests almost his grip is tightening and that she is in danger. And then we have the writing technique alliteration, hair and hung on. That sort of her sound, slightly harsh, hair hung. That suggests the sort of tense moment. Let go, she cried, let go. That repetition shows her panic and fear. Then we have Lenny's reaction. His face was contorted. The simple sentence there suggests the tension building. And then it follows up by her, please don't, he begs. Sorry, that's him. He's begging her not to almost make a fuss. Oh, please don't do that. George will be mad. He has no understanding of his strength and why she might be in pain. He simply remembers his fear from what happened in Weed, and now it's almost happening again. And as soon as he's frightened, he doesn't know how to deal with the situation because he doesn't know how to cope in an adult world, and he simply holds on tighter. So things like the line underneath, she struggled violently under his hands. Obviously, violence is a theme, and it is being very much shown right now. So towards the bottom of page 99, Lenny grew angry. Now don't, he said, I don't want you to yell. He doesn't know how to cope with the situation. He doesn't know how to cope with adult situations. Then he breaks her neck, and the description that Steinbeck uses is, and her body flopped like a fish. Now that is the same description that he uses in section 3 when Lenny has crushed Curly's hand. And that simile is used to represent Lenny's strength. A bit further on down the page, it shows that Lenny doesn't mean to do this. He's not doing it out of meanness, which is something that George and Slim say, so it's a good sort of quotation to embed. I don't want to hurt you. It's not out of meanness, it's accidental, it's because he's panicked and he's fearful. And then it's very childlike. Done a bad thing, I've done another bad thing. It shows his sort of childlike personality and how he can't cope with the things that he may have encountered. This bit is sort of the moment after things have calmed down. He poured up the hay until it partly covered her. Again, animalistic use of pause there. And the bit that I think is very interesting is when Steinbeck says, for the first time, Lenny became conscious of the outside. It's not just the men outside who are playing games and that's why no one's come into the barn, but almost conscious of what he's done. It can almost be metaphorical. for, you know, what he's actually done to this girl, and he's realising the severity of the situation. He's gonna be mad is a reference to George, because of course that's what he cares about. He doesn't really comprehend that he's killed someone. He's worried that George is going to be mad at him, and he goes to the brush. Cataphoric reference, because obviously that leads into section 6, and it's also the cataphoric reference revealed from section 1 when George says, you know, if something terrible happens, if you do another bad thing, you come back to the brush. So it's that cataphoric reference revealed, and it also shows the cyclical structure, meaning it's a circle. It starts where it ends, and it's about to end back in the brush. At the bottom of page 100, there is a bit of description. And the light was growing soft in the barn. That metaphor shows the contrast between the sunlight that was before and sort of the darkness. Light was growing soft. Rather than saying darkness, he said growing soft. And I think that's interesting because it's almost suggesting the pitiful situation. This was not an act committed out of violence and anger. This was out of panic and fear. And I think that's why growing soft has been used. But it suggests sort of the foreboding atmosphere that's been created. It's a real juxtaposition of imagery from the nice calm barn that was described before all of this. Here we have something else. The air in the barn was dusky. This is on page 101. Again, dusky is sort of like getting darker, also perhaps not sort of the cleanest. And it's just sort of suggesting that kind of action, and now everything's calm, but it's not how it was before. There's also a description of the dog and the pups catching the scent of Curly's wife, and the hair rose along her spine. It's a real sense of foreboding and gives a suggestion of what is going to happen next. Of course, the men are coming to find her. And I think it's quite ironic with Steinbeck using rouged and reddened again. Obviously, we've seen all the way through. Up until this moment, it's always been prior to her revealing her dream, and so it's always in the sense that she is flirtatious, that is, she is being deliberately appealing to the men. And now it's almost that she's finally at peace, that those red cheeks and the reddened lips and the curls, tiny little sausages, everything that she'd kind of worked towards, and she was living such a miserable life, she's finally at peace. At the bottom of 101, the men's voices became louder and clearer, and it's almost that move to reality, the tension created prior to that, with the movement stopped for much, much more than a moment. It's almost like time has stopped because of this tragic moment, and then moved to reality as the men are about to enter the section. So on page 102, the description continues. Candy comes in and says, "Oh, Jesus Christ," when he realises that Curly's wife is dead. And there's a really nice metaphor used. Remember, whenever you see description, you're looking for writing techniques or connotations of words. But the barn was alive now, meaning not only sort of the people going in and out of the barn, but also the energy, so almost the tension is sort of building within the barn, where it was quite calm and peaceful. It's also ironic that alive has been used when Curly's wife is lying there dead. George comes in and echoes Candy's words, "Oh, Jesus Christ," and it shows his shock and the severity of the situation. Moving to page 103. This first section shows sort of the fear for Lenny that George has, especially in 1930s America. He knows sort of the way this will be treated. He knows he'll be locked up, and because of the way he can't cope with things, he knows that he won't cope in that situation. And that's why he says maybe they'll lock him up and be nice to him, almost in sort of hope. But in the 1930s, that was not the case. It was sort of very clear cut. So he knows that's not going to happen. And Candy says Curly will get him killed. Candy is very aware of what the situation will be. And then Candy speaks his greatest fear. And you and me can get the little place, can't we, George? You and me can go there and live nice, can't we, George? Can't we? It's almost that even though he is concerned about Lenny, he's more concerned about the dream. And of course, George doesn't need to answer. Candy dropped his head and looked down at the hay. He knew. And that simple sentence there just shows almost the disappointment that Candy feels. And that's emphasised when he said, then it's all off, Candy asked sulkily. Again, he does care about Lenny and the situation, but he has been pinning all hopes on the focal dream becoming a reality, and now this has impacted and affected its likelihood of becoming real. So moving to 104, George is commenting on Lenny and why he's done this, and he says Lenny never done it in meanness, and this is the kind of quotation you can use to embed, even if you're not talking about this section, it really shows that he doesn't act in terms of a way that is mean and violent like Curly would, but actually does it because he's fearful, and it shows that it was an accident. And he is protective over Lenny, as he has been since this first section. I ain't going to let him hurt Lenny. He knows he has to do something to protect Lenny from the men. And it shows that sort of unique friendship that they have in 1930s America, when every man was for themselves. And it also shows that parental-child relationship that we talked about all the way through. Then George goes off and Candy is left alone with the body of Curly's wife. And he really isn't very pleasant to her, and he calls her "you goddamn tramp," because she, and the fact that she has ruined the dream, has really impacted his ability to be able to feel sorry for her. Obviously he doesn't know anything about her dream and why she behaves the way she does. The only person who does is Lenny, and he can't comprehend it, so he feels very angry towards her. And what's interesting about Curly's wife is she does actually destroy all dreams. She destroys Crook's dream in section 4 when she threatens him and he no longer wants to pursue any hope of equality. Then she destroys the focal dream, which impacts George, Lenny and Candy by encouraging Lenny to touch her hair. And obviously it's not her fault that she gets killed, that is Lenny's. And then obviously that then refers to section 6 when George shoots Lenny, and that also is because she has been killed. So she is a real catalyst in destroying dreams in this novel. Cataphoric reference reveal. Everybody knowed you'd mess things up. That's been said multiple times, and that is the revelation of the cataphoric reference. And he kind of describes the focal dream to her. At this point, rather than gaining power, it's almost this sort of pathetic, empathetic description, and it shows what they could have had but never will. If we go on to page 105, we see the use of alliteration in a description section, burst into the barn. This is where the men come in, and that sort of harsh sound really shows that energy that they have, they want to come and see what's happened. The reactions between Slim and Curly are very interesting here. Steinbeck describes Slim going over to her and he describes it as quietly. It shows that sort of calm, kind personality that Slim has, whereas Curly, who should be the most upset as it's his wife, seems almost thrilled that he can seek revenge on Lenny for obviously his hand. When they describe George, when Steinbeck describes George, it's almost as if George is numb, that he can't quite comprehend what has happened. And then when Slim refers to weed, again, the cataphoric reference is revealed that we have seen in sections 2 and 3. And Slim kind of says to George, I guess we've got to get him, Slim repeated. It's the only option. It's the way things are done. It reflects the way things are dealt with in 1930s America, which of course is not going to be nice for Lenny in any shape or form. George is very blunt in his responses. It shows how it's affecting and impacting George. And it is suggested that Lenny has taken Carlson's gun, but of course it isn't Lenny, it's George that's taken it, because he knows what he needs to do before the men find Lenny, and then he knows where Lenny will have gone. Now the men are almost excited. It's not that they dislike Lenny, it is more the fact that this is out of the norm. It is outside their everyday life, and it was so mundane and the same day in, day out. This provides something different. This provides an element of excitement. And, they want to involve George. George, you stick with us. We don't think you had nothing to do with this. That sort of threat level. They're all getting a bit overexcited. And that's a real contrast to the way Steinbeck describes George. George moves slowly after them, his feet dragged heavily. That's a metaphor there. Of course, as soon as you see any description, you're looking for connotations or writing techniques. And really, dragged heavily suggests a weight, but not an actual weight, perhaps a weight of sadness over what he needs to do. So moving on to the last page of this section, which is page 108. There are cinematic techniques used. And it shows the sort of similar description as end of section 4 and beginning of section 5, with the onomatopoeia of the rattle of the halter chains. Things haven't changed, same as usual. The barn is as it was, even though, one life has been ended and another one is soon to be ended. Life continues for the ranch men. And that is the end of section 5. Only one more to go. Hurrah!